so, I passed through after I died. And still in a state of waiting for reincarnation. Looking at his transparent soul body and the vast white space around him, Mu couldn't help but feel a little dazed. This scene is indeed somewhat miraculous. But it is a modern youth who has experienced the baptism of various internet cultures. Mu quickly accepted the status quo. And decided to cast a good tire. Is the system there? Mu meditated in his heart. Sure enough, the next second, a mechanized voice sounded in his mind. Hello host, the rebirth simulator is here for you. Zzzizizizi, the expected golden finger did appear. But before he said a word, he got stuck inexplicably, and made a sound similar to that which occurs when a machine is scrapped. Mu panicked in his heart, and at the same time was a little speechless. No way? Will it be scrapped just after passing through the golden finger? The quality problem is too big, I want to complain. Fortunately, after Mu complained a few words, the system seemed to return to normal, and the mechanized voice sounded again. Detected that the host's world is extremely dangerous. In order to serve you better, the system is automatically changed to a death simulator, allowing you to have a better death experience. What? A death simulator? The two sentences after the system was restored made Mu stunned. Why does he feel that something is wrong with his golden finger? Death simulator? Let the host have a better death experience. The experience of death is good for a fart. Mu just died once, but she doesn't want to die again. However, no matter what he thinks, his first life after transmigration is about to begin. The first rebirth is about to begin. Please allocate basic attribute points and select initial talents within 3 minutes. If the timeout is not completed, it will be randomly assigned and selected. The mechanized voice sounded again. At the same time, a virtual screen appeared in front of Mu. Host, Mu unassigned base attribute points, 10 body : Chi? Life : Seeing that there were only 3 minutes left, Mu couldn't think about it anymore, so he could only assign attribute points first. It's just that he doesn't know anything about the world that is about to be reborn, and he doesn't know how to allocate it the best choice. After thinking for a while, Mu decided to add more body and wisdom. As the saying goes, my life is up to me. As long as one's own ability is strong enough, one can change one's life against the sky. With this idea in mind, Mu quickly allocated 10 basic attribute points. Host, Mu unassigned base attribute points, 0 body, 5 intelligence, 4 life, 1. The allocation of basic attribute points is completed, and the corresponding copies are generated. Please choose 3 initial talents. Following the prompt from the simulator, 10 grey talents appeared in front of Mu. He glanced at it and found that these talents are very strange and evil. Immortal, corpses decay slowly. Early death, the mortality rate increases greatly before the age of 3 Tian. Randomly missing a certain organ at birth. Remorseful, the pain of death will be magnified tenfold. Taiyan, the fate of the great yin, it is easy to recruit ghosts, demons, and evil spirits. Feast, flesh and blood are extremely delicious and unforgettable. Bliss, life expectancy is shortened to 30 years old, you can reach bliss early. Happy and mourning, death after 100 years old will reward 1 basic attribute point. Good luck, bad luck before the age of 80, good luck after the age of 80. Rest in peace, instant death when fatal damage is encountered, reducing pain. What is it? Mu rubbed his temples with a headache. Of the 10 talents, none of them are serious. To hell! Death is more painful, flesh and blood tastes better, death is early, and it is easy to attract ghosts. What are all these things? Can this be called talent? Mu really wanted to ask if this simulator could be returned. He wants to change his golden finger. With 3 minutes to come, the helpless Mu could only choose 3 relatively harmless talents. They are immortal, feast and rest. Immortal, corpses decay slowly. Feast, flesh and blood are extremely delicious and unforgettable. Rest in peace, instant death when fatal damage is encountered, reducing pain. These 3 talents will at least not cause So Mu much trouble when he is alive. After choosing, So Mu's first life in another world begins. The simulation starts. Host, So Mu body, 5 intelligence, 4 life, 1 talent, immortality, feast, rest. As the virtual panel lighted and faded, So Mu's consciousness fell into darkness. Dagon, the 12th year of the apocalypse. In a remote mountain village in Jizhu, a baby named So Mu was born into this world. 3 years later, his mother died of illness. For another 2 years, his father also died on the bedside. At the age of 5, So Mu was an orphan. And in order to bury his father, he sold the only remaining property in the family. Except for an empty earth-shattering house, So Mu has nothing. Is this the fate of 1 o'clock? So Mu helplessly sighed at the graves of his parents. If this is an ordinary 5-year-old child, with no relatives, no reason, and no family. Basically, there is only one dead end. But So Mu was a second generation after all, and after burying his father, he started his own way of survival. Relying on his clever mouth and cuteness, he went around the village to beg for alms and managed to get food from hundreds of families. Reading www.yuugonshu.com, but it is only the level of starvation, and the suffering is so much that I don't know where to start. However, So Mu still underestimated the horror of fate. In the 20th year of the apocalypse, Jizhu was dry, causing a famine. Rolling disaster victims, like avalanches, like huge waves, rushed to other lands. In less than a month, the number of victims exceeded 1 million. And So Mu, who was only 8 years old, was one of the earliest ones. As a traveler, So Mu has not shown any of his talents yet, but he was swept up by the torrent of fate and became a member of the disaster victims. This made him see the danger and horror of this world. I saw the horror of famine even more. In the early days of the famine, wherever the hungry people went, the bark was stripped away, the grass seeds stripped away, and the beasts retreated. Even tigers and wolves dare not approach the starving victims. Some wealthy households and landlords with grains were also robbed. But that little grain is not enough at all. Soon, more and more people starved to death. The survivors who barely survived were all skinny and withered faces. They are like walking dead, dragging their half-dead bodies, walking on this dry land. By this time, the beast was no longer afraid of the victims. 9 out of 10 victims of the disaster have become wild beasts. Even the wild dogs are eating people. Most of Jizhu has been reduced to hell. And So Mu is one of the people struggling in this hell. Thanks for watching, please subscribe. Among the victims, a small figure is somewhat special. In this world, very few orphans can survive. Not to mention surviving a famine. Among the unavoidable crowd, So Mu was the only child who had no relatives and no reason. It's a bit incredible that he can hold out until now. But it's approaching the limit. The last time So Mu ate something was 4 days ago. There are many people who have been hungry longer than him, but he is a child after all. 4 days after the grain of rice was not in, So Mu only felt dizzy and weak in his limbs. If he doesn't eat any more, he can only hold on for 1 more day at most. Death is quietly approaching. Are you going to starve to death like this? So Mu was unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. He is just a dead leaf in the famine, which may be engulfed by the waves at any time. Night began to fall. So Mu was lying weakly beside a tree stump, and his consciousness began to become confused. I don't know whether to fall asleep or faint. Just when So Mu was staring, a figure sneaked towards him. Boisu, Boisu, wake up! Although he was hungry for a long time, the skeleton of this figure was still tall. It can be seen that this person was once a strong man. Who? Uncle Li? Is there something wrong? So Mu glanced at the person who came, and immediately recognized the person. Li Taizu, a blacksmith in the same village as So Mu. His son Li Lei and So Mu are the same age, and they have a good relationship. Most importantly, in the 3 years after both parents died, Li Taizu gave So Mu half of his food. With this kindness, So Mu is relatively close to Li Taizu. Li Taizu looked around vigilantly and found that no one was paying attention to them before whispering to So Mu, "Boy Su, I have something to eat, come with me. Don't make a sound." Hearing this, So Mu's eyes lit up. The little remaining strength burst out of his body, and he got up and followed behind Li Taizu. Under the cover of the night, the two walked out of the crowd and walked into the distance through a dead wood forest. "Uncle Li, what did you find to eat?" So Mu, who was extremely hungry, didn't think much about it for a while when he heard that he was eating. Now calm down, he vaguely feels that something is wrong. "It's a deer, I caught a deer," Li Taizu said casually, occasionally looking sideways at So Mu, as if he was afraid that he would be left behind. "Deer? Uncle Li, do you still hunt? But there are no bows and arrows, and no traps. How did you hunt a deer?" So Mu's breathing stagnated, and he felt more and more wrong. After the famine, the animals that are easy to hunt and catch have long been caught. The remaining beasts are either hunters or ghosts. Li Taizu, a blacksmith, caught a wild deer with his bare hands? What kind of joke is this? Ha ha, luck, luck. Seeing that Li Taizu didn't intend to explain too much, So Mu's heart sank to the bottom. He looked up at Li Taizu. "I saw that this person's cheeks and eye sockets were deeply sunken, and a pair of green eyes stared at him. Shaped like a ghost. What's even more terrifying is that his strange eyes are filled with ferocity and madness, unlike what humans can have." At this point, Li Taizu no longer intends to hide it. The murderous appearance is revealed. This scene made So Mu feel bad. He took a few deep breaths, and his mind turned to pay attention. So Mu pretended to be nothing and asked Li Taizu, "By the way, Uncle Li, why didn't you see the stone?" Stone is Li Lei's nickname. If it wasn't for So Mu's suggestion, his name would probably be Li Shitu. "Stone, eat it, eat it. If you see the broken temple in front of you, he'll be waiting for you inside." Li Taizu pointed to a ruined temple 200 or 300 meters ahead, and his voice became gloomy. His full of malice has spewed out. So Mu pretended not to notice, lowered his head and sighed, and said, "If only my aunt was still alive, she wouldn't starve to death with this deer." Li Taizu's wife left the remaining food for her husband and son, and her health has not been very good. Not long after fleeing, he died of starvation and cold. Hearing this, Li Taizu's eyes narrowed, and a bit of guilt and pain were revealed in his hideous and strange expression. But before he could think about it, So Mu suddenly pointed to his side and shouted in horror, "Auntie! Auntie is standing beside you." "What?" Li Taizu was taken aback by So Mu's shouting. His complexion changed greatly, and he quickly turned to look. Taking advantage of this opportunity, So Mu ran away and plunged into the dry woods. This Li Taizu has a problem, he must not go to that ruined temple with him. "Stinky boy, dare to play with me." Li Taizu, who didn't see anything, immediately reacted. He cursed loudly and hurriedly chased after him. Relying on her small size, So Mu dodged from side to side in the dead wood forest, trying to get rid of Li Taizu. But after all, he is only 8 years old. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com has been hungry for 3 or 4 days, how can he still have much energy? Although he tried everything, but after running for half an hour, So Mu was still caught by Li Taizu. "Stinky boy, let's see where you're going this time." Li Taizu's large, rough hands are like iron tongs. One stuck So Mu's neck, and the other clipped his hands behind him. So Mu was suppressed and unable to move, like a chicken, and was carried by Li Taizu to the ruined temple not far away. Along the way, no matter what So Mu said, Li Taizu ignored it. This made So Mu a little desperate. After approaching the ruined temple, So Mu smelled a faint smell of meat. The smell of meat made his saliva secrete frantically, and his hunger multiplied. But So Mu had already vaguely guessed what kind of meat it was. A chill spread throughout his body. The strong nausea made him want to vomit, but there was nothing in his abdomen to vomit, he could only retching. Li Taizu didn't care what So Mu thought, he quickly walked into the ruined temple with him. The temple is small, with only a half-a-man-high earthen statue sitting in the middle, flickering in the moonlight. The statue was badly damaged, and it was no longer clear which Buddha it was. There were 4 men crowded in a small place. In the middle is a large vat, with a fire on the bottom, and soup is boiled in it. While the soup was tumbling, you could see many bones floating up and down. The flesh on it has been gnawed clean, but it is still reluctant to throw it away. It is estimated that the bones will be knocked open and the marrow inside will be eaten up. Although it was only a few rolling moments. But So Mu can see clearly, these are not animal bones at all. Stone, I did eat it. Finally, another one has been caught. My son is 13, your son is only 8 years old, and there is too little meat. With this, it can be evened out. Stop talking nonsense, hurry up. Throw this kid in the pot, I'll starve to death. Yes, hurry up. Everyone is hungry. This kid has nothing to do with us, the big guys can eat it together. Those 4 yellow-faced, thin-skinned men were like hungry ghosts. After seeing the So Mu in Li Taizu's hand, they all urged impatiently. Those turbid eyes are full of almost crazy longing. Against the backdrop of the firelight, the twisted faces of the 4 people flickered, more terrifying than a demon. So Mu is like falling into an ice cave. Ye has already guessed his own destiny. Although it was difficult to suppress the fear in his heart, he still made his last attempt. Uncle Li, you watched me grow up. Do you have the heart to do this? So Mu, who was stuck in the neck, couldn't move. He couldn't turn his head to look at Li Taizu, so he could only scream desperately. The next moment, a voice so dull that it made the hair stand upright came faintly. Boy So after your father and mother passed away, I provided you with so much food. Is it considered a support for you? Raise chickens to eat chickens, and ducks to eat ducks. Is there anything wrong with that? Today, it's time for you to repay me. By the way, let's be a companion for the stone too. Having said that, Li Taizu walked quickly towards the big vat. The boiling soup made So Mu feel a blazing heat, but it couldn't melt his blood that was about to congeal. Uncle! Wait, wait! My stomach hurts, I'm going to run thin. You wait for me to finish pulling, don't let me ruin this pot of good soup. Shh. In the end, before So Mu, who still wanted to struggle a little more, finished speaking, a thick, blood-stained sickle stabbed into his neck fiercely. After being fatally wounded, the skill rest is triggered. In an instant, So Mu died, and his consciousness fell into darkness. Fuck! So Mu couldn't help but curse loudly. His life was really miserable. He lost his mother at the age of 3 and his father at the age of 5. Relying on a method similar to begging, he barely survived to the age of 8. The result was a rare drought and famine. The scene of starving and dying is like hell. The most terrifying thing is that this disaster not only destroyed the body, but also the spirit. The once kind blacksmith turned into an ogre, not even letting go of his own son, let alone So Mu. Fortunately, he didn't die too painfully. I don't know if it is the only blessing in this tragic life. The bitter past of the past 8 years turned into a scene of memories that kept flashing in So Mu's mind. But soon, So Mu realized something was wrong. Shouldn't we return to the white space before after death? Why is there any movement? Just when So Mu was puzzled, he suddenly regained his hearing and received the sound of the outside world again. It was the conversation, chewing and swallowing of the 5 villains. Delicious! Really delicious! How can it be so delicious? I have never eaten something so delicious. It's so fragrant. I didn't expect this kid to look so bad, the meat is so fragrant. Don't rob, don't rob. It's mine. Give it to me, I caught him, give it to me. In your mother, bring it to Lao Tzu. Don't force Lao Tzu to do it. Hearing these voices, Su Mu had mixed feelings. He didn't expect that under the effect of the feast skill, this group of people actually fought for his meat. At the same time, I couldn't understand why I heard the outside voice again. But more than that, it's disgusting. Is disgust. Under the disaster, people have become ghosts. If he has the ability, Su Mu really wants to kill all these inhuman things. The scramble did not subside, but became more and more intense. I caught him. I raised him. Give it to me. Let go. Let go of Lao Zi. I'll your mother. With a scolding, Su Mu heard a dull and huge knock. It seems that some kind of heavy object hit the skull. Immediately afterwards, a pop sounded from the tank. Someone else fell into this mank-illing vat. Silence, deathly silence. After the sound of falling, the ruined temple instantly became quiet. Arguing, chewing, swallowing. All disappeared. Only the sound of rapid breathing remained. But soon, the sound of chewing sounded again. And faster than ever. Su Mu's heart was icy cold. He knew that someone else died. He was beaten to death by his companions, and then fell into a big vat, becoming a new round of food. Listening to the previous conversation, this person should be Li Taizu. For some unknown reason, Su Mu's heart was filled with surging anger and killing intent. These negative emotions are like a sudden fire. The more it burns, the more prosperous it becomes, the more fierce it burns. The next moment, a faint light pierced the darkness in Su Mu's field of vision. His vision actually recovered. I saw that under the night, the dilapidated small temple looked like a devil's cave. 4 skinny men devoured some kind of flesh like wild dogs. And spread out, occasionally looking at the companion next to him with vigilant eyes. The center of the broken temple. The worn-out clay statue had only one eyelid hanging down. As if watching all this silently. Vaguely, its eyelids seemed to tremble. Very weird. But the 4 people in the ruined temple didn't notice it, and continued to devour frantically, dropping bones one by one. They didn't even notice that some of the discarded bones moved slowly. Putting them together, they turned into a small skeleton that was about half a person's height, and made a caw-caw sound all over. Now, the 4 of them finally found something different. Ah! Ghost! Ghost! Don't kill me, I eat less, I eat the least. Don't kill me! Bodhisattva, save your life, get this ghastly thing. These 4 wicked men, who were still ferocious just now, were scared to the core. Someone slumped to the ground and begged the little skeleton for mercy. Someone knelt down in front of the dilapidated sculpture and begged God to worship Buddha. There were also people leaning against the wall and trembling, looking at the exit behind the little skeleton, thinking about how to escape. No matter what they do, they are extremely frightened. These countrymen are usually in awe of ghosts and gods. At this time, just after the evil deed, he ran into the moving skeleton. How can you not be afraid? What they didn't know was that Su Mu, who was incarnated as a skeleton, was in terrible condition. For some reason, he who was supposed to die suddenly gained a power. With the help of this power, Su Mu manipulated his bones to piece together, forming a small skeleton. But, that's all. Su Mu could feel that the skeleton was so fragile that it could be blown over by a gust of wind. Under the frightened gazes of the 4, Su Mu cautiously took the first step forward. Seeing the skeleton monster moving forward, the 4 of them were even more frightened. One of them even got his crotch wet and his eyes wandered. But the next moment, whoa! As soon as Su Mu's foot landed on the ground, it fell apart under the action of the shock force. So Mu, who was extremely speechless, didn't have time to complain, and his consciousness was pulled out of this world. The next second, he returned to the initial space. The last scene I saw in my memory was the 4 people with dazed faces. This simulation ends score, G dungeon completion, 11% points earned. 1 comment, your short life is only 8 years, and there is no achievement, the only effect is to fill the stomach of some existence in So Mu's ear, the long-lost mechanized voice sounded. But he was still immersed in the pain of the previous life. If you don't experience it yourself, you don't know how terrifying the famine is. Years of hunger, people eat each other. In these short 5 words, the cruelty was exhausted. Li Taizu's few people will never be an exception. As the disaster continues, the refugees will only get crazier. In such hell, dying sooner is not necessarily a bad thing. Hey! After taking a long sigh of relief, So Mu calmed down and began to review the experience of the previous life. Everything else is okay to say, the only special thing is that he didn't die directly after his death. Instead, under the support of a strange force, it turned into a skeleton. Although it is extremely fragile, it is definitely some kind of demon, some kind of ghost. This shows that death is not the end. So Mu had already vaguely guessed the usage of the death simulator, so he only needed to verify his conjecture. However, before entering the dungeon for the second time, So Mu needs to prepare. First, after earning 1 point, the system's mall is activated. It sells all kinds of weird stuff. There are props, talents, and some things that So Mu can't understand for the time being. However, 1 point is too few to buy anything at all. After searching, So Muhua bought a booklet recording skeletons and ghosts with 1 point. I hope I can get some information from it. With this in mind, So Mu opened the booklet. After opening it, the first thing you see is an opening quote. The Tao is divided into yin and yang. People are yang and ghosts are yin. Life is yang and death is yin. The transformation of yin and yang is the way of heaven. So Mu repeated it half understood. Looking further down, it's the text. The first ghost recorded in this booklet is called Bone Boy. Bone Boy, the little skeleton that a child turns into after his death, is mischievous and has little harm. After reading Gutong's brief introduction, So Mu was sure that it was what he transformed into in the last life. Say something so naughty. In fact, he is too weak, and he has no ability to kill people. But it shouldn't be so fragile that it will fall apart with just 1 step. So Mu guessed that the Bone Boy he transformed into is not a complete body, or there is some kind of problem. But as the saying goes, once is born and twice is cooked. The first time I died, I had no experience. After a few more deaths, So Mu believes that he will definitely be able to sum up some experience and evolve into a more powerful monster. This, perhaps, is the role of the death simulator. So Mu originally wanted to turn to the back to see other skeleton monsters. It turns out that this booklet is not the whole book, 1 point. But apart from the opening quotation, 1 page is 1 credit. If you want to look back, you have to give points again. The impoverished So Mu scolded the system. Afterwards, I sorted out my thoughts and prepared to enter the dungeon again. After the base attribute points are allocated, the copy will be generated. Therefore, the basic attribute points cannot be changed. Fortunately, the skills you carry can be changed. So Mu felt that none of the 3 talents he chose in his previous life seemed to have played a role. Then this time, just replace them all. After excluding 3, there are only 7 talents left. In addition, the skills good luck and joy and mourning can also be ruled out. So Mu couldn't even live to be 8 years old, let alone 80 and 100 years old. So these 2 skills are completely useless. In this way, there are only 5 skills left: early death, heavenly remnant, bliss, remorse, and Tai Yin. After thinking for a while, So Mu made a choice. First, he chose bliss. If you can't live to 30, you can't live to 30. Anyway, he couldn't even live to be 8 years old. Then, So Mu chose Tai Yin. This skill will make it easier for him to attract evil spirits. But So Mu faintly felt that the bone boy he transformed into was so fragile, it might have something to do with the lack of yin qi. Choosing this talent might make the demon he transformed into after his death even more powerful. As for the last skill, So Mu really doesn't know how to choose it, it feels like a pit. In desperation, he could only add the happy and mourning that was excluded at the beginning. At least this talent won't fool him. After choosing 3 talents, So Mu started the second life restart. The simulation starts. Host, Sumu body, 5 intelligence, 4 life, 1 talents, bliss, Taiyin, joy and mourning. As the virtual panel in front of him faded, So Mu's consciousness fell into darkness. He was born again in that small village. But this time, there has been a huge change in life. Not long after he was born, So Mu discovered an abnormality. In this life, his appetite is terrifying. Correspondingly, it is several times the growth rate of ordinary people. At the age of 3, So Mu was as tall as his mother. Then, his mother died. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. At the age of 5, So Mu's height caught up with his father. Then, his father also passed away. So Mu's fate has not changed. At the age of 5, he was once again an orphan. The difference is that So Mu, who is only 5 years old in this life, is as tall as a short adult. At this time, he finally understood the role of the talent bliss. Burn life and accelerate growth. Death before the age of 30 is the final result. If it is a normal situation, this skill has no effect, but is a big hole. But for the current So Mu, it is a magical skill. Not to mention that he became an orphan at the age of 5 and needed to survive alone. 3 years later, a terrible famine awaits him. In this kind of disaster, the chances of survival of adults are many times higher than that of children. With the talent of bliss, So Mu finally saw hope of living. However, this talent also brought him trouble. What So Mu has to do now is to eat and live. In the last life, he was pitiful by pretending to be cute and begged for food from other villagers. But in this life, So Mu grew up like a monster. And there's an odd coincidence. When my mother is so tall, she will die. When my father was so tall, he died. As a result, So Muji became an ominous person in the eyes of the villagers. No villagers were willing to give him food at all, and some even wanted to drive him out of the village. But how could So Mu, who just died once, be starved to death? Even kicked out to die? No, right? Ro. I'll take it myself. In order to bury his parents, So Mu sold the only remaining property in the family. And the villagers regard him as an ominous person, and they can't wait to drive him out of the village. As a result, So Mu's normal way of survival was completely cut off, and there was no way for him to work hard. However, he was someone who had just died once. How could he die so uselessly? If you can't get food by conventional means, then use unconventional means. A physique of 5 points is not a white point. In addition to the extremely fast growth rate, So Mu's physical fitness is also beyond that of ordinary people. According to his observation, the physique of ordinary villagers is about 3 o'clock. Therefore, the usual 3 or 5 adults are not his opponents at all. In order to survive, So Mu raised his fist. Since then, there has been another country bully in the village. Even the surrounding villages have been destroyed. Fortunately, this village tyrant doesn't want anything else. As long as he can eat his fill, it doesn't add any burden to the villagers. However, his reputation for monster, killing parents and running in the countryside is getting louder and louder. With all kinds of buffs added, the villagers basically turned around and ran when they saw him. After more than 2 years, So Mu's height has reached 7 feet 5 inches, which is almost 1.8 meters. Not only is he taller than most adults, but he is also extremely strong and full of strength. In the past 2 years, So Mu had thought about escaping from Jizhu and away from the famine. However, the Dogon dynasty restricted the flow of people, and there was no reason why they could not run around. Helpless, So Mu could only continue to stay in the village. In order to meet the coming famine, So Mu quietly stocked up some dry food. But he was not able to stock up too much, let alone hold a large amount of food. Not to mention So Mu, even the wealthy households in the nearby towns were robbed after the famine came. All he could do seemed to be waiting quietly for the famine to come. But this day, So Mu's life ushered in a turning point. There are still 8 months. In the early morning, as usual, So Mu first calculated how much time there was before the famine. Afterwards, after taking a shower, he staggered to the next village. In the 4 or 5 surrounding villages, there are 500 or 600 households, excluding some of the more difficult families. The So Mu family spends a day. In 3 years, 2 rounds are over. He also thought about helping people work in exchange for some food money. But these ignorant villagers are convinced that he is an ominous person, and would rather give him some food for nothing than have anything to do with him. Helpless, So Mu could only be at ease as his village tyrant. So Mu has come here for the 2nd time today. Far away, he shouted. Aunt Lu, is my meal ready for today? Hurry up and bring it out. The owner of this house is named Lu Tianlang, who is barely a small landlord. After So Mu cleaned up some of the tenant farmers under his command, he had no objection to the 1 seer meal. But what So Mu didn't expect was that something unexpected happened this time. I saw a middle-aged man with a height of 7 feet and a pale complexion walked out of the Lu family's house. Behind him, standing is Lu Tianlang. Brother, you have an injury now, why don't you just forget it? Anyway, it's just a few meals, so what if this kid rubs it? Lu Tianlang looked at his elder brother Lu Feng with some worry. At first So Mu thought that Lu Tianlang was looking for someone to take revenge, but after seeing this scene, he realized that he was wrong. But Lu Tianlang's eldest brother didn't stop there. He looked at So Mu in surprise and asked Lu Tianlang, Alang, how old do you think this kid is? 8 years old. 8 years old? This 8. It's really 8 years old. This kid is very weird. At 3 years old, he was as tall as his mother, and at 5 years old, he was as tall as his father. Then he killed his father and mother. Everyone in the surrounding villages knew about this. Tisk tisk tisk. The bones are amazed. Lu Feng looked at So Mu with bright eyes, as if he was looking at some treasure. So Mu frowned and retorted, don't talk nonsense, I'm only 7.5 years old. Also, what about the meal I want? My family knows their own affairs. So Mu knew that he was not someone who was surprised by his bones. He only got his current body by burning his vitality and his 5-point physique. But Lu Feng didn't know. He coughed a few times, took a breath and said to So Mu, boy, I heard about you. At the age of 5, he lost his parents and was despised by others. It is understandable to ask for stuttering in order to survive. But today you begged me, so I won't agree. So Mu looked at Lu Feng, who was a head shorter than himself and seemed to be injured, and asked casually, what do you want? Do you still want to fight with me? Hearing this, Lu Feng grinned and said, hey! Your kid was right. I heard that at a young age, you fought all over the surrounding villages without any rivals. Today, I want to see how much you have and how many tales you can come to my Lu's house to ask for food. After all, Lu Feng shouted violently and suddenly shot. This Lu Feng looked sick, but when he moved his hands, he was as fierce as a tiger and as swift as a fox. The distance of more than 20 meters was instantly crossed, and he punched the door at So Mu's face. So Mu, who didn't take him seriously before, changed his face. He didn't have time to dodge, so he could only put up his arms to resist. Boom! With one punch, So Mu took a dozen steps back. I just felt my arms were numb and tingling. There seems to be some minor fractures and fractures. Is this still a power that humans can possess? So Mu was horrified. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. His body is very strong. Although he is not yet 8 years old, it is estimated that he can already compete with the top fighters on the earth. Otherwise, he would not have the ability to roam the countryside. But this middle-aged man, who was a head shorter than him, felt like he was falling apart with one punch. And this guy is still wounded. Is that human being? On the other side, Liu Feng was also secretly surprised. So Mu was just an ordinary person who had never practiced, and he actually resisted him with a punch and didn't fall down. It's really talented. The more Liu Feng looked at So Mu, the more he liked it, but his men didn't stop. He quickly chased after him, and another unremarkable straight punch slammed into So Mu. He wanted to see where the physical limit of this 8-year-old child was. In the face of this most powerful enemy in history, So Mu is also ruthless. In the face of this fast and heavy punch, So Mu raised his hands and seemed to want to block like before. But at the moment when Liu Feng's fist hit him, he immediately turned sideways, bent his left arm into a shield, covered his head, and resisted the punch. Huge strength ran through So Mu's body. This time, not only was his left arm numb and tingling, but his body was shaken to pieces. But the huge power of this punch was transmitted to the right side through the left side of the body. Back to you! So Mu roared angrily and threw out his right arm, smashing Liu Feng with a punch. Liu Feng didn't expect So Mu to have this move, and was punched firmly in the chest. He staggered back a few steps and almost fell. His complexion seemed paler. It's complicated, but it's actually as fast as lightning. From Liu Feng's second punch to So Mu's counterattack, it was only a breath of time. The people around didn't see what was happening at all, they only heard bang bang, and the two separated. Among them, So Mu fell to the ground. And Liu Feng staggered back a few steps, and then coughed violently. Seeing this, Liu Tianlang's complexion changed greatly, and he hurried up to meet him. Big brother, are you all right? Liu Feng waved his hand and said, it's not in the way, it's not in the way. There's not much time left anyway, it's not bad for this punch. Cough. Cough, cough. Although he said so, he coughed so badly that it took a long time to calm down. On the other side, So Mu took advantage of this time to get up. She grinned and looked at Liu Feng with a wary expression. This middle-aged man who seems to be riddled with injuries is outrageously powerful. So Mu felt that he was not an opponent, and was already thinking about how to run away. But after calming down, Liu Feng said something that he didn't expect. Boy, would you like to worship me as your teacher? So Mu was stunned for a moment. After thinking about it for a while, he didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, why are you so powerful? So fast? I've never seen someone like you. Hearing this, Liu Feng raised his head and laughed. Ha ha ha! You kid, you are not only strong at such a young age, but your brain is also ghostly. But after all, he is still a child with little knowledge. After laughing, Liu Feng's expression became solemn, and he said solemnly, this world is huge, bigger than you can imagine. There are too many things you can't understand. I'm just a little third-rate warrior. To be precise, it used to be. Hearing this, So Mu's heart moved. He felt that he was finally going to come into contact with higher-level information in this world. Warrior? What is a warrior? So Mu asked again eagerly. The so-called warrior. Liu Feng had the idea of accepting apprentices, but seeing So Mu's curiosity, he explained it. People in this world are born with a mouthful of innate essence, which is hidden in the blood and blood of the meridians. A martial artist is a person who grows this innate essence through constant tempering, thereby gaining powerful strength. In order to cultivate and fight, warriors have created many exercises and martial arts. Today, martial arts has become very prosperous. However, if you want to practice martial arts, there is still a low threshold. If you want to get started, you must have strong blood and strong muscles and bones. In this way, the food cannot be checked, and meat is basically indispensable. It is very rare for a person like Soo-mu who eats ordinary food but is vigorous. And he was so tall before he was 8 years old, and his bones were amazing. This gave Liu Feng a love for talent. Accepting an apprentice might give him more color in his dying life. After learning about the existence of martial arts, Soo-mu did not hesitate to take Liu Feng as his teacher. You can eat and live for nothing, and you can also practice martial arts. A fool would not agree. In this way, Soo-mu joined the Liu family as Liu Feng's only closed disciple. In fact, Liu Feng is not a martial arts master. There was a general in the ancestors of the Liu family, and then it became more and more declining. In order to regain his former glory, Liu Feng joined the army when he was young. However, his abilities are limited. After more than 20 years, he is only a centurion. In terms of martial arts cultivation, he is only a third-rate martial artist who has just started. Originally, Liu Feng had vaguely reached the threshold of entering second-rate martial artist. I don't want to be seriously injured in a mission some time ago. Not to mention the advanced level, the cultivation of third-rate warriors has not been preserved. Liu Feng, who injured his meridian and source, was seriously injured and had no choice but to return home alone. After staying for a while, I learned that there was a young village tyrant like Soo-mu in my hometown, and I started to love talents. It can be considered as a thought for him, who has no children and no daughters. Although he is no longer at his peak, he has not even kept the cultivation of third-rate warriors. But Liu Feng has been in the army for more than 20 years, and he has extremely rich fighting experience, so it is more than enough to teach Soo-mu. In addition to the regular physical exercise, to strengthen the spirit, Liu Feng also taught Soo-mu a set of boxing techniques and a set of sword techniques. The boxing method is a common practice in the military, and it is not forbidden to spread the mountain-shaking boxing. This set of boxing is very open and close, fierce, which is very suitable for Soo-mu. The swordsmanship was handed down from the Liu family's ancestors. Because it was the general who realized it during the battle on the battlefield. Therefore, it is also open and closed, the swordsmanship is simple and concise, but it is extremely fierce. Time is spent in Soo-mu's diligent study and hard training, day by day. In the following months, most of Jisu did not rain and was abnormally dry. This strange weather made Liu Feng, who was already seriously injured, unable to support him any longer. After teaching Soo-mu for more than 4 months, he passed away. In the past 4 months, Liu Feng has devoted himself to teaching Soo-mu martial arts, as well as some experience in fighting. Basically taught everything that could be taught. Fortunately, Soo-mu lived up to expectations and absorbed all the knowledge like a sponge. Not to mention the rapid progress, a little talent still counts. This made Liu Feng leave with a slight smile on his face. In addition to this, the Liu family has also achieved the ultimate in Soo-mu's food. Soo-mu's appetite was about 3 times that of ordinary people, and Liu Feng also demanded that the meal must be of the highest quality. The Liu family's family business is not large, so it is really difficult to eat like this. As the owner of the house, Liu Tianlang was a little dissatisfied. After all, he himself would not dare to eat so well. With Soo-mu's way of eating, one person can beat their family. But at Liu Feng's strong request, he could only eat with Soo-mu. I have lived in this copy world for more than 10 years. Liu Feng is the only person who treats Soo-mu so well. After his death, Soo-mu wore hemp and filial piety, and kept his filial piety for 3 months. Going forward, I can't keep it. Because famine is coming. Although I was prepared in my heart, this day still came very suddenly. In the middle of the night, Su Mu was lying on the bed and sleeping. Suddenly there was a loud noise outside, mixed with a few screams. Finally coming. Su Mu rolled over and got out of bed with a reel, quickly put on his clothes, and carried the ring-headed sword that the Lu family had made for him behind his back. At this time, outside the Lu family's house, a group of victims in ragged clothes were madly charging the gate. Open the door for grain, open the door for grain. People are going to starve to death. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Open the door. The big guy works hard, just knock the door open and you'll have something to eat. It's these wealthy households who are killing us and have no food to eat. Rush in and grab them all. Kill them all. In bursts of howling, hundreds of victims kept pounding the courtyard gate like wild beasts. Although there are many heavy objects behind the door, it still can't stop more and more victims. Boom! Finally, with a loud bang, the courtyard gate collapsed. The starving victims outside the door rushed in like crazy. During this period, several people fell down, but no one cared about them and stepped on them one after another. At the back, I was almost trampled into a muddy flesh. During a famine, it is all too common for the hungry to rob the rich and landowners. This terrible situation has scared away all the long-term workers hired by the Lu family. Seeing that the Lu family's house was about to be looted, a cold light flew over. Shhh. With the sound of the air being torn apart, several great heads flew high, and blood spurted. The few people who rushed in the front were actually headed by a knife. After half a breath, the corpse shook and fell heavily to the ground. This scene is terrifying. However, before the hungry people could react, a loud shout exploded in the courtyard like thunder. Su Mu is here, who dares to move around? Those who cross this line, die. The hungry people looked up stupidly. I saw an 18-foot strong man, holding a large knife with a ring head that was dripping blood, drawing a blood line on the ground heavily, and squeezing out a string of sparks. That chilling an aura is blowing towards the face. Su Mu Hengdao immediately, standing alone in front of hundreds of hungry people, full of murderous aura. All the starving people who were forced to do so did not dare to go forward, with expressions of fear on their faces. After taking Lu Feng as his teacher, the Lu family did all they could for him to practice martial arts and provide him with food and drink. The quality of the diet has increased more than tenfold at once. In addition to practicing martial arts every day and filling blood, it is more conducive to growth. Now, Su Mu's height has jumped to 8 feet, which is a little over 1.9 meters. Moreover, he is extremely strong, standing there even if he does not move, it gives people a strong sense of oppression. Like an iron tower. In this way, Su Mu stabbed the hungry people temporarily. But only temporarily. These people are already starving. And there are constantly hungry people coming up behind. Su Mu knew in his heart that when the number of hungry people reached a certain level, they would overcome their fear of him. So, before coming here, Su Mu notified Lu Tianlang and asked him to take his family out through the back door. Bring some food, but not too much, otherwise it will be too conspicuous. Su Mu stayed here, just waiting for them to leave safely. Time passed little by little. Whether it was Su Mu or those hungry people, every second was extremely tormented. Half an hour later, the outside of the Lu family's house was already crowded with hungry people. They squeezed forward little by little, pushing the person in front of them to move forward. Everyone's emotions have reached their peak. Finally, a spark ignited the powder keg. He's alone, so many people can still be stopped by him? Kill him, and the food will be behind him. This sentence completely detonated the madness and desire in the hearts of all hungry people. Yes, kill him. If you kill him, he will have enough to eat. This reckless man is alone, why are you afraid of him? These wealthy households are the most hateful, and I don't know how much they need to eat to get such a big chunk. Kill him! Kill him! In the crowd, there was one after another in response. Pairs of green eyes stared intently. I don't know if it was driven by the people behind, or the starving people in front lost their heads. The crowd began to rush towards Su-mu, and every starving person's withered face was full of madness. Looking for death. Seeing that the situation was not right, Su-mu shouted angrily and slashed at them with a knife. The Luya swordsmanship opened and closed, sweeping through the crowd like a meat grinder. For a time, flesh and blood flew, and the limbs danced wildly. After Liu Feng's death, there were still 4 members of the Liu family. Liu Tianlang's husband and wife, and a pair of children under their knees. Counting the time, they should not have evacuated to a safe place at this time. Su-mu must buy them a little more time. After practicing martial arts for half a year, Su-mu was about to enter the realm of a third-rate martial artist. Dealing with these hungry people who haven't eaten for a few days couldn't be easier. But the number of hungry people was too large for Su-mu to kill them all. And his purpose is not to kill, but to delay as much as possible. Half an hour later, Su-mu dropped dozens of corpses, one of them turned over the fence, and disappeared into the darkness. The good old mansion of the Liu family is about to reach the end of its lifespan. Under a big tree at the back of the village, several figures swayed. One of them was pacing back and forth, looking restless. "There's nothing wrong with that kid Su-mu, right? My brother asked me to take care of him before he died. He can't be in my hands." Liu Tianlang was a little anxious. "Dad, don't worry. Little brother Su is strong and strong. Those hungry people can't do anything to him." Liu Tianlang's eldest daughter, who is 14 years old this year, was born slim. It was she who spoke in the dark. To be honest, Liu Qingqing didn't even know what to call Su-mu. Call him little brother, that size and appearance really don't match. But he's only 8 years old, so he can't call him big brother, can he? "Father, my sister is right. Big brother Su is a strong martial artist, isn't it like killing chickens to clean up those hungry people?" Liu Tianlang's second son is 10 years old this year. After spending more than half a year with Su-mu, he completely bowed to him, one big brother at a time, and there was no psychological burden when he shouted. "I hope so." The words of the two made Liu Tianlang feel a little relieved. Sure enough, after a while, the 4 Liu family members saw a tall figure running towards them quickly. Not Su-mu, who else could it be? "Are you all right?" Su-mu glanced at the 4 of them, and after confirming that they were all right, he still asked a question. "It's okay, what should we do now?" Although Su-mu was covered in blood, he knew it was someone else's. Liu Tianlang was relieved. Asked about the next plan. No wonder Liu Tianlang would ask an 8-year-old child. Su-mu, whether in mind or appearance, looks like a wise adult. This made Liu Tianlang unconsciously forget his age. This famine will only get worse. Escape, first escape from Jizhu. It is good. It's also an escape from the famine. This life is much better than the previous one. In this life, Su-mu has a strong body and martial arts skills. Although he has not stepped into the ranks of third-rate warriors, he should be able to protect himself in a famine. Moreover, I brought some food from the Liu family, so I should be able to stick to it until I leave Jizhu. Su-mu thought about it for a while, and felt that he shouldn't have to die in this life, he could live a good life. As predicted. Although the next itinerary was difficult, it was generally smooth. Along the way, many people wanted to rob Su-mu of the food they were carrying, but they were all killed by Su-mu neatly. After all, he carried some rations with him, so it wouldn't cause a large-scale looting. At this time, Liu Tianlang couldn't help but sigh, feeling that his eldest brother, this apprentice, was really right. Without Su-mu's protection, their family would never have been able to go on so smoothly. In the next month or so, the famine intensified, and the number of hungry people became more and more. Fortunately, Su Mu and Lu Tianlang's family of 4 are still alive and well. It's just that she lost some weight, and her clothes are a lot worn out. Overall, it has been very smooth. There was only one thing that made Su Mu feel a little strange, and felt a little uneasy in his heart. A few days ago, when he walked through a dry wood, he remembered the dilapidated small temple. So I went over to have a look, thinking that if I meet Li Taizu's few people who ate him in the past life, they will all be killed. By the way, it can also rescue some people who are about to become their rations. But what Su Mu didn't expect was that the ruined temple had disappeared. No matter how much Su Mu looked for, there was no trace of it. But in the last life, Su Mu was obviously eaten in that ruined temple. How could he remember it wrong? Uneasy, Su Mu Ben plans to ask a few local hungry people. It's a pity that the crowd of people fleeing the desert has become a mess, and no one can be found at all. Helpless, Su Mu could only keep this matter in his heart. But since then, he vaguely had a strong premonition. This Jizhu, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to escape. After a few days, the escaping team grew bigger and bigger. And Su Mu's sense of uncertainty in his heart also became stronger. Especially at midnight, he always felt that there were a pair of eyes staring at him in the darkness. Staring at him, the back of his spine felt cold, and the cold air rushed upwards. But if you look around, you can see nothing but the hungry. In the vast darkness, there is no special existence. This could not help but remind Su Mu of the talent Tai Yin that he carried. Tai Yin, the fate of the great Yin. It is easy to recruit ghosts, demons, and evil spirits. In the past 8 years, Su Mu had never encountered anything strange, let alone evil. Over the years, he gradually forgot this skill. But the experiences of the past few days have brought the skill Tai Yin back to Su Mu's sight. Today is a time of famine and turmoil, with countless dead and wounded, full of grievances. Some ghosts and sprites appear, which seems to make sense. It's just that Su Mu didn't know how to deal with those ghosts. I can't expect all the ghosts and demons to fall apart just like the little skeleton he transformed into in the last life, right? Thinking of this, Su Mu's heart sank slightly. The next road, I'm afraid it won't be easy to walk. In the middle of the night, Lu Tianlang's family of 4 had already slept. Only Su Mu lit a bonfire and kept vigil alone. The flames jumped, illuminating all within a radius of 10 meters. But farther away, it was completely dark. The overlapping shadows, coupled with the faint smell of meat in the air, made it impossible to tell whether those lying down were humans or ghosts. Looking at it, Su Mu suddenly felt a little dazed. The firelight in front of him gradually became psychedelic, and the feeling of sleepiness surged up. Just when Su Mu was about to fall asleep, he suddenly felt someone approaching him again. Su Mu shuddered all over and woke up immediately. Who? Su Mu shouted loudly and turned around abruptly. At the same time, pull out the ring-headed sword, ready to kill the enemy at any time. What? The visitor was startled. He took a few steps back and almost fell to the ground. Su Mu took a closer look and saw that it was Lu Qingqing, Lu Tianlang's eldest daughter. What are you here for? Su Ban asked with a straight face. Lu Qingqing calmed down, and then said angrily, "Isn't it because you're dizzy and sleepy? I'm afraid you'll catch a cold and want to cover you with a blanket." Su Mu glanced at the blanket in her hand and said, "Thanks." Saying that, Su Mu put away the knife and reached for the blanket. Lu Qingqing also walked forward, trying to pass the blanket to Su Mu. But at the moment of handover, Su Mu's ring-headed sword that was about to be retracted suddenly swung out. The swift and violent knife slashed heavily on Lu Qingqing's neck. Pfft! In an instant, blood spurted out. More than half of Lu Qingqing's neck was cut off, and her head was tilted to one side, with only a few flesh left to barely support it. You! Lu Qingqing's face was covered in blood, and she looked at So Mu in disbelief, as if she didn't believe that So Mu would shoot her. So Mu's face was cold, and he waved his knife again without saying a word. This time, Lu Kingking's neck could no longer support it. A beautiful head flew high. You can't cut off your head with one knife, and you have to pretend that you are Lu Qingqing. When this Lu Qingqing first appeared, it gave So Mu a strange feeling. This feeling is very weak. However, coupled with the inexplicable drowsiness that came up before, it was enough to make So Mu's heart alarm bells. With his energy, how could he doze off during the vigil? It's all weird. There is definitely something wrong with this Lu Qingqing. So he pretended to pick up the blanket and really wanted to kill someone with a knife. The fact that the head of Lu Qingqing was not cut off with a single knife further showed that the guy in front of him was definitely not Lu Qingqing. So Mu slashed with all his strength and could easily decapitate the horse. Not to mention the head of a weak woman who has not cultivated. After 2 knives, So Mu didn't take care of the corpse anymore, but looked at the place where Lu Tianlang's family rested before. Seeing this, So Mu's complexion changed drastically. I don't know when, the scenery around him has changed. Lu Tianlang's family of 4 disappeared. There was no sign of the hungry people lying all around. And, a thick grey fog rose up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Visibility decreases rapidly. In an instant, it seemed as if So Mu was the only one left in the whole world. Just when he was in shock, the headless corpse that had been headed just now suddenly moved. It landed on all 4s and crawled towards So Mu as fast as a big spider. In just a trance, this ghastly thing has already come to his face. What the hell? Being startled, So Mu cursed in his heart, and before he could swing the knife, he punched him directly. Boom! This powerful punch directly knocked the twisted headless corpse into the air. But it did not die, but disappeared into the grey fog. At the same time, there was a rustling sound in the increasingly dense grey fog. Obviously, there are more ghosts approaching So Mu. At this moment, the visibility of the grey fog is already less than 3 meters. In this environment, it is basically equivalent to half-blindness. So Mu could only rely on his other senses to try to locate these ghosts as much as possible. The ghosts in the grey fog did not directly attack So Mu. Instead, it surrounded him, walking around constantly, making a strange rustle sound. In such a situation, it is easy for people to panic, and even lose their way. But So Mu squinted his eyes, and then stood there in a relaxed state, motionless. He stood with a pestle and a knife, his eyes half open and half closed. Those who didn't know thought he was taking a nap. So Mu thought very clearly that in this kind of environment, taking the initiative to attack is not a good choice. If you attack blindly, you will be found by the enemy. What he has to do now is to be vigilant while relaxing, and to be able to shoot at any time while maintaining a good state. Defensive counterattack. UU reading www.uuganshu.com is the best choice. In the grey fog, the rustling continued. The chaotic voice made it impossible to judge how many ghosts were surrounding So Mu. But So Mu was unmoved, without the slightest fear or panic. Time passed little by little. Finally, the ghost in the grey fog couldn't hold back. A sneaky figure was crawling on the ground, almost touching the ground. Under the cover of grey fog, it circled behind So Mu and quietly approached. The distance between the two keeps shrinking. 5 meters. 3 meters. 2 meters. 1 meter. During the whole process, So Mu didn't seem to notice and remained motionless. However, when the distance between the two sides was only 1 meter, the ghost was about to shoot. So Mu moved first. His eyes suddenly burst open, and 2 rays of light shot out. Die! So Mu shouted angrily and kicked the back of the ring-headed broadsword on the ground. The ring-headed broadsword swirled and flew over his head like a gust of wind. Precisely nailed the ghost that was about to attack him to the ground. At the same time, Mu just turned around. He stepped on the ghost's head with one foot, pulled out the ring sword and looked quickly. A few swords flashed, and the limbs and head of this ghost were all chopped off. In this way, even if this ghost can still move, there is no threat at all. The whole process of beheading a ghost was neat and tidy. From kicking a knife to slicing an adult, it only takes the blink of an eye. An unknown ghost fell into Mu's hands like this. After killing the first ghost, 7 or 8 more popped out of the grey fog. But they were all beheaded by Mu. These ghosts are not strong. Their speed is very fast, but their strength is only slightly stronger than that of ordinary people, and their lethality is limited. In addition, the body is tough and the vitality is extremely tenacious. Only by dismantling them can they be completely killed. Mu checked and found that these ghosts seemed to be transformed from corpses. The Lu Ching Ching who wanted to sneak attack on him before was also a skinny and hideous corpse. The reason why he was able to blind Mu's eyes should be the use of skills such as illusion. But the bad thing is that even if these ghosts are dealt with, the grey fog around them still hasn't dissipated. It really sucks. Mu frowned and whispered, then searched in the grey fog. Live to see people, die to see corpses. No matter what, he couldn't leave Lu Tianlang's family of 4 alone. Mu, who was trapped by the grey fog, seemed to be in a huge labyrinth. No matter how you walk, you can't get out. Along the way, let alone people, I didn't even see a single bird or beast. I don't know how long it took, when a strange voice suddenly sounded. The time has come, the gate of heaven is open. With this voice, the surrounding grey fog receded like a tide. Later, Mu was horrified to discover that a dilapidated building appeared in front of him. It was the ruined temple where the previous life was buried. How could this ruined temple appear here? Or in front of you? Mu was only 10 feet away from it, why didn't he find it at all just now? Mu felt a little hairy in his heart, and the ominous premonition climbed to the top. Crunch! When Mu's thoughts were confused, the 2 dilapidated temple doors slowly opened. A cloudy wind blew out, and there was a strange smell of meat in it. Hearing this smell, Mu couldn't help but get goosebumps. But soon, his heart was filled with anger. In the temple, 5 humanoid ghosts surrounded a large vat and devoured them frantically. There were countless bones in the vat, and there were 4 unfinished corpses. It was Lu Tianlang's family of 4. Their eyes were filled with fear, their faces twisted together. It seems that I didn't expect to end up like this. Childhood is the most ominous time of the day. Yin Qi reaches its peak, Xiao kills everything, and ghosts run rampant. And this ruined temple is obviously not a good place. Mu clearly saw that one of the 5 humanoid ghosts looked very much like Li Taizu. At this moment, he vaguely understood. Before the famine, Li Taizu, who was honest, kind, and friendly, suddenly ate his own son, and he didn't even let him go. Now it seems that it is affected by some kind of strange power. Even though Mu is only a mile away from a third-rate warrior now. But stepping into this ruined temple will not have any good results. However, the man does some things and some things don't. Lu Tianlang's family was kind to him, and now he was implicated and died here tragically. No matter what Mu said, it was impossible for him to just leave. Take. Tread. Tread. Mu walked into the ruined temple step by step. The moment I stepped in, I suddenly felt like my whole body was being swallowed by darkness, as if I had fallen into a quagmire. Mu's strength was only 50 or 60% in an instant. This made his heart sink to the bottom in an instant. What happened next was beyond Mu's expectations. The 5 humanoid monsters were still devouring them frantically, and they didn't seem to notice Mu, who was not far in front of them. Instead, it was a clay sculpture in the center of the ruined temple. Suddenly, his eyes moved, staring at Mu and talking. The blood is strong, and the yin is very heavy. There are still people like this in the world? It's weird. It's a pity that the martial arts cultivation is too low. If it is a first-class martial artist, is it worth it? Cluck! Cluck! As he said that, the shabby clay statue let out a strange smile, and So Mu's brain tingled as he heard it. What the are you? Although he was ready to die, So Mu couldn't just die like that. He must come up with more useful information to prepare for the next rebirth. Who knows, after hearing his words, the clay statue suddenly became angry. Presumptuous! I am the Daozun, Kirong, you blaspheme! Why don't you give up your flesh and blood to help me refine the 5 elements corpse puppet? After all, the 5 corpse puppets who were still eating flesh and blood just now suddenly turned their heads and stared at So Mu with a lifeless expression. So Mu ignored the 5 ghosts who were obviously puppets. One jumped towards the clay sculpture, and cut off the head with a big knife. Shh! A knife flashed by, but So Mu did not have a machete. The clay sculpture was clearly right in front of him, and it was like looking at a phantom after cutting it, and it had no effect at all. Breaching Daozun, the crime should be punished. The clay sculpture opened and closed its mouth, and a strange voice sounded. At the same time, pale ghost hands stretched out from the ground and walls, grabbing So Mu from all directions. Fortunately, these ghost hands can be cut. So Mu swung his sword again and again, severing a lot of ghost hands. However, the movement is still severely restricted. What's worse, the 5 corpse puppets have already killed him. The 5 corpse puppets in the temple are called the 5-element corpse puppet by the clay sculpture. There is a world of difference from the stuff out there. For example, the Zhengjin corpse puppet transformed by Li Taizu is not only powerful, high defense, and fast. It also carries a strange and cold Zhengjin aura. After approaching, these chi of Zhengjin continuously penetrated into So Mu's body, destroying his flesh and blood. After half an hour of fighting, So Mu was completely at a disadvantage. Accidentally, the corpse puppet transformed by Li Taizu took advantage of it and bit it on the neck. I didn't expect to die in his hands in this life. A helpless thought popped up in So Mu's heart, and then his consciousness fell into darkness. He is dead again. After So Mu died, the other 4 corpse puppets quickly followed suit and devoured his flesh and blood frantically. Bliss! This talent allows So Mu to burn his life, possessing chi and blood far exceeding that of ordinary people. Not to mention that he also practiced martial arts. And Tai Yin made So Mu possess an extremely strong yin chi. These 2 things that appeared at the same time were not the same, but when they were rarely combined, they became the best blood food for corpse puppets. It didn't take a moment for So Mu's tall and strong body to be eaten away with only a skeleton. There was a strange sound of laughter in the ruined temple. Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! It's done, it's finally done. After absorbing these blood food, my 5-element corpse puppet will be perfected. The laughing dilapidated clay sculpture looks extremely strange. But it didn't notice that the little knuckles of So Mu's skeleton, which had been devoured, trembled slightly. In the gloomy night, there were bursts of strange laughter from a small dilapidated temple. In this empty environment, it seems very terrifying. But suddenly, a foot stepped in. Immediately afterwards, a middle-aged Taoist priest with a medium stature and an ordinary appearance came. He walked slowly forward, and every time he took a step, his figure flashed more than 10 meters away. In just a few breaths, he came to the door of the ruined temple. His arrival stopped the cunning laughter in the temple abruptly. It's you? Why are you sticking to me like dogskin plaster? The clay sculpture was startled and angry, with a vague sense of fear. The middle-aged Taoist stared at the clay sculpture and said with a half-smile, Junior brother, if you let you harm the people like this again, where will our Tianyu Jiao face be? Look at your current appearance, as well as the few ghosts you have refined under your hands, what are you looking like? Listen to my senior brother's advice. If you cultivate like this, it's better to die early, and start over again in your next life. Wu Vi, Wu Vi. Master gave you a Taoist title, that's right. Saying that, the middle-aged Taoist shook his head again and again, looking like he hated iron. There was also a little contempt in his eyes. Hearing that, the strange clay sculpture's face was twisted and hideous. Apparently he was outraged. But he didn't do it directly, as if he was forcibly suppressing his anger. His senior brother, the Taoist name is King Suzi. Not only is he extremely talented in cultivation, but he is also extremely shrewd. Obviously, Qing Suzi had already locked onto this Yadao junior brother who had turned into a clay sculpture. But he kept waiting. When the five elements corpse puppet devoured Su Mu's flesh and blood and entered the refining stage, it appeared in a hurry. After Yadao Wuviiza betrayed the Tianyi sect, he was constantly chased and killed, and he had few cards left in his hand. Only these five corpse puppets can be used. But now it is in the advanced stage, and it will take some time before the advanced stage is successful. At this moment, it is his weakest time. Seeing his junior brother's appearance, Qing Suzi laughed teasingly and said, "Junior brother, haven't you recognized the reality? Now you are neither human nor ghost, neither yin nor yang. Let's not talk about strength, even the brain is almost useless. A skeleton demon was born under your nose, and you didn't even notice it." As soon as these words came out, Su Mu was shocked. After his death this time, Su Mu felt a strong yin qi gather around him, turning him into some kind of demon again. I don't know how many times stronger than the little skeleton from the previous life. But Su Mu still didn't have the confidence to defeat the weird clay sculpture in this ruined temple. After all, he didn't even know the details of the other party. So, Su Mu chose to lie still on the ground, waiting for the right moment to make a move. After Qing Suzi arrived, Su Mu Ki got a lot of information from the conversation between the two. But Su Mu continued to hide, and Qing Suzi's words exposed him. On the other side, Yadao Wuviiza was also very shocked in his heart. He didn't expect that strange warrior just now turned into a skeleton monster after being eaten by all the flesh and blood. And he chose to play dead and lurked under his nose. What makes Wuviiza feel most uncomfortable is that he really has become a waste, like King Suzi said. Otherwise, how could you not even notice this? Qing Suzi's words broke the peace in the ruined temple. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Mu, who had turned into a skeleton demon, suddenly burst out and killed Wuviiza, who looked like a clay sculpture. Many ferocious bone spurs grew on Su Mu's bones, making him look terrifying. In the last life, when Su Mu died, he was just a weak child with insufficient yin. In this life, he is not only 8 feet tall and strong in bones and muscles, but under the influence of the talent of Tai Yin, he has absorbed enough yin. Ha ha ha! One after another, pale and ferocious bone spurs flew out of Su Mu's body and shot at the clay sculpture. Like a white rainstorm. Boom! Under Su Mu's attack, the clay sculpture burst, and a crooked and twisted figure flew out of it. It is the essence of Wuviiza. Little skeleton demon, how dare you fight me? Wuviiza noticed that this skeleton demon was much stronger than usual. But being chased and beaten by such a low-level ghost made him very embarrassed. Especially in front of that despised senior brother. The embarrassed Wuviiza couldn't care about the smiling King Suzi standing outside the temple. He decided to use all his strength to destroy this skeleton monster first. Go! With a flick of his skinny fingers, a rotten human head wafting black air flew out of his big sleeve, heading straight for Su Mu. In an instant, black qi shrouded Su Mu. This strange black gas entangled Su Mu's bones like maggots in the tarsus, causing him to be trapped in a quagmire, greatly reducing his strength. The rotten ghost head took advantage of the opportunity to bite on his leg bone. As a martial artist, Su Mu's bones are inherently strong. The incarnation of the skeleton demon queen is more than 10 times stronger. And yin qi is entangled, ordinary creatures will get seriously ill just by getting close. But I don't know what the origin of this rotten ghost head was, and it bit So Mu's bones abruptly. So Mu was furious, his thoughts flew around in his head, and he quickly analyzed the current situation. At this time, there was a demon inside the temple and a Taoist outside the temple. Yadao Wuviiza doesn't need to say more. There is a deep hatred between So Mu and him, and there is only the possibility of a deadly fight to the end. And Ching Suzi outside the temple is obviously a serious Taoist. I didn't make a move at this time, I just wanted to use So Mu as much as possible to consume Wuviiza's energy. Even if So Mu killed Wuviiza, King Suzi would not let him go. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. After all, he is a monster now. And eliminating demons and guarding the way is the duty of Ching Suzi. After a quick analysis of the situation, So Mu found that if he wanted to survive, he had to kill Wuviiza and King Suzi in succession. This is obviously impossible. A Wuviiza with a great loss of strength can easily hurt him. So Mu's strength is still not enough in front of these two Niobe who have been practicing for a long time. Since they are all dead, let's give our lives to fight. A frenzy rose in So Mu's heart. Ka-ka-ka. Ka-ka-ka. A strange voice sounded from So Mu's body. Immediately afterwards, he saw that all the bones on his body were separated. Bones big and small float in the air, pointing directly at Wuviiza. Disintegration. Wuviiza and King Suzi shouted in surprise at the same time. The skeleton demon is a low-level ghost, its strength is generally weak, and its means are very simple. But they didn't expect that this newly born skeleton demon actually chose to disintegrate in order to play the strongest blow. After this blow, So Mu's body fell apart and his breath disappeared. The real end will come. But before that, he must make Wuviiza pay the price. Roar! So Mu's lonely skeleton let out an angry ghost howl. Immediately afterwards, he let all the bones on his body and flew towards Wuviiza. He is willing to be cut all over, dare to pull the emperor off his horse. So Mu, don't talk about flesh and blood, don't even want bones, still don't believe that you can't eat a piece of meat from this demon. This is his anger.